Hello, welcome to my show. My name is Bret. This is my live channel. I'm here live every Thursday. So if you're new, if this is your first time watching, if you're watching live, thank you for showing up. The reason this is live is because for my guests and the topics, we take Q&A. So throw your questions in early. This week, we're talking all about a product called Shipyard, and we're going to be talking about ephemeral environments, what that means, breaking that down. It's going to be a lot of fun. So real quick, thank you all patrons of this show. I thank you so much for supporting this work and all the open source I create, the podcast, my GitHub, endless amounts of repos, all those things. Thank you so much for those. You do not have to buy me a coffee every month to get my updates. About once a week, you'll see updates on all the things I'm doing, things I'm releasing or updating, or new guests on the show, other stuff like that. You just have to scroll down and click the follow button. You can get the link below. And then, of course, we have right above me the Discord server. We just passed 7,000 people on our DevOps Discord server there at devops.fan. So go check that out. Basically, we're on there every day talking about DevOps stuff, containers mostly, but not just containers. So please join us for free. And let's get to it. I'm excited to get busy on this topic because this is one that's near and dear to my heart. Today from Shipyard, we have here Benjie from, I said Shipyard already, but he is the CEO and co-founder and also a extreme geek like myself. I think he put in his little bio that Commodore 64 was his first programming, which I was not far off from that with a Tandy color computer too. So welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I prefer the term nerd, by the way. Over
okay.
Just
for
the record. I just want you to know that I prefer.
I appreciate you clarifying.
Yeah, no, I just, we got to be specific. No, I'm just kidding. But my sister, I have an older sister, and when I was young, she told me that I should identify as a nerd, not a geek, for whatever reason.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know what the difference is. To me, it's kind of the same thing, but I do what I'm told.
I do see how people identify. Maybe I need to ask that in the forum. Do you prefer geek or nerd?
Yeah, just a little checkbox in the form.
I have a sweatshirt that has geek in 200 font or something like that, and as if people need to know that, read that in order to figure it out for me, because I am wearing a May Stack Overflow be with you t-shirt. So
that's pretty good. I
like the mashup. So I don't actually know where you're calling in from. I didn't ask you that question.
Oh, no problem. I'm coming in here from New York. I'm in Brooklyn. And
nice.
Shipyard is New York based, but we're mostly remote at this point. But I am in Brooklyn.
Right. Nice. So we're not too far away. I could make it up there in an afternoon.
Yeah.
What's the story with you getting to Shipyard? Because I've been hearing chatter about Shipyard for a while now, but I don't know how you got there or how you co-founded that.
Yeah, I mean, the story really starts a long time ago. I've been on the technical side of startups for a very long time, always kind of responsible for DevOps in general, and it's something that I was always super interested in. So, go back to 2007, something like that, writing my own orchestration layer in Bash for Linodes. Didn't quite work, although it worked kind of. And then, been in the ecosystem for a long time. Chef, Ansible, Salt even for a little bit.
Nice. I remember Salt.
Yeah, Salt was great. It was very similar to Ansible, and I just kind of liked Ansible. I also did a stint of Puppet a long, long time ago. And then in 2013, 2014, whenever that was, I got somebody very smart. I can't remember who it was. It's like, oh, check DocCloud out. And I was like, what is this? And then I realized, DocCloud became Docker. And so, they're doing really cool stuff with C groups and all kinds of stuff like that. So kind of got involved in Docker, not really in the community as much, but just really using it. And then kind of the same story with Kubernetes. My super smart Google friends were like, oh, hey, remember that thing that we told you about that we're not really supposed to tell you about? It's kind of creepy sounding. And I was like, oh, you mean Borg? And they're like, yeah. Well, Kubernetes is the open source version of that. And I was like, oh, cool. So got super into that early on as well. yeah, ended up uh, doing that professionally, VP of engineering capacity, CTO co-founder capacity for a few years. Actually joined a company called Replicated, and they help companies do on-prem like SaaS products. And so super into that stuff. Ended up leaving that company and kind of becoming like an advisor consultant to a bunch of New York ecosystem companies making the transition from, let's just say, traditional virtual machines to a Kubernetes landscape. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of challenges in that, and ultimately, I had a lot of work. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And I brought in an old colleague of mine, Peter, who is now my co-founder at Shipyard, and we went around New York and we were just helping a lot of companies of all sizes and shapes, set up and efficiently make Kubernetes a part of their workflow. I would say halfway through that, we kind of kept building the same thing over and over again. So we kind
Right.
of built ourselves, like the first iteration of Shipyard was actually just like an exoskeleton for myself and Peter to make our
Right.
jobs
For
easier.
customers, just to help them. Yeah. So you were
Yeah,
scratching your own itch with this startup, basically. Yeah.
exactly. It was not a startup; it was a consulting company, and
Oh,
we
we're gonna
weren't
make a
gonna take
product.
money. No, no, no. We were very happy being consultants. Heptio style, whatever.
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe that's a little unfair to maybe that's a little dreaming, but we were doing well. And um and then kind of some of our customers was like, oh hey, they saw what we were doing, like, oh, can we click that button? And we're like, yeah, why not? Have access to it, it's great, it makes life easier. Um and then fast forward, we kept kind of building and building and building. And I kind of had said very explicitly, never going to take VC money again. I don't like being on the hamster wheel, whatever, whatever, whatever. Hell has to freeze over before I'm going to do that. And then in 2020, hell froze over, and there was a pandemic. I don't know if you heard about it, and
Kind of a big deal.
got yeah, kind of a big deal. And then got super fortunate where some really awesome investors kind of we ended up doing a round there and taking the product to the next level and building out the team. And so that's the really good side effect of that, is like we've built a really awesome team. And so for the last year, we've
Nice.
been pretty heads down, building, working with design partners. And yeah.
Well, thank you for that. There are lots of little nooks and crannies that we kind of talked about before the show that we could go down rabbit holes. So for those of you watching live, this topic, and as we get into Shipyard, we're going to talk a little bit about what ephemeral environments are, basically systems that can go away and come back, and that you have a pattern for recreating them, most importantly. So get your questions in on, because I personally have a lot, like there's many different ways we can do this. What's the methodology and some of the lessons learned? We're going to get in all that. But for those of you watching, the key is to put in some good questions. So, what is Shipyard is the great first question. But we're gonna pause on that because I want to get Benjie to talk a little bit about a different site they have running called ephemeral.environments.io. So
Yeah.
this thing.
So yeah, so in general, this is just a mini site, or like a community site, trying to highlight some best practices for ephemeral environments in general. Disclaimer: Shipyard powers ephemeral environments, or one aspect of ephemeral environments. That's kind of what we do. We'll get back to that.
Yeah.
But this ephemeral.environments.io, it's really kind of meant to be. It's open source. Please, pull requests are welcome. And it's really just kind of meant to be a resource, because one of the things that we've seen um, in the community is that ephemeral environments, and well, let's define that for starters. I think you did a good job, but essentially, these are, I hate to use the word disposable, but I'm going to. These are disposable environments, and they're full stack environments. So if you want to test a data migration, for example, on staging data. If you do that just straight to staging from your local development environment, you could break staging, and that could cause a lot of problems for a lot of other team members, from QA to product people to whomever, and also most likely block your build pipeline and your deployment pipeline. So having the ability to have these single-use environments and these disposable environments creates all kinds of efficiencies there. And kind of the ephemeral environments.io kind of goes through a lot of what you get out of it. And again, this is just the beginning. We're just trying to kind of educate people on all this stuff. It's very much a pattern in the FANG world, the Googles and the
Sure.
Netflix and whatnot. And it's kind of because of Kubernetes, because of containers, it's now starting to trickle down to the rest of us. And so, just introducing the concept of ephemeral environments is super important.
It's a great topic that I'm glad you mentioned the fact that, a lot of these concepts start early at the cloud providers and basically the companies that run the world now, because for so many, this is kind of a pipe dream, right? Like, I think for the average default team and just the average default company, like that isn't tip of the spear, isn't going to KubeCon every year and and just absorbing all this stuff. The idea that they can not only build an environment, but build it, tear it down, and build it up again exactly the same way in a reliable manner, only when they need it. And so I'm almost looking at this page as like your version of like the ephemeral version of 12 factor. Is that kind of what it seems like we're going for here? It's like there's this manifesto of 12 factor for those of you who haven't seen it. Like, that's, to me, when there's someone who's brand new to all this stuff, DevOps, containers, like they haven't been paying attention for over a decade. I send them to 12 factor first just to make sure that they have a good solid background before we start discussing these kinds of things. But I don't know if the word ephemeral is ever used on the 12 factor website, but it would almost be like the 13th to me. Like, make things recreated, like be able to recreate anything.
I could not agree with you more. And in fact, if you scroll up a little bit, you'll see that one of the quotes we have, keep going, is from James,
it's from
right there.
Heroku. There you go.
Who was they were the original authors of the 12 factor app. So I'm very fortunate to have James as kind of an advisor he's an investor in Shipyard, and and an advisor. And so, James was instrumental in helping to articulate a lot of the stuff that we are talking about. And he was an author or a co-author of 12 factor. And so, just for the audience, we did not talk about that ahead of time, but like, that was the best. That was the best that is a huge compliment to compare it to that. So thank you.
Yeah. And it might've been subliminal because I did read his quote.
Okay.
I was reading it. Yeah. It might've been one of those things but I mean, honestly, I mean, over a decade later, and I still reference 12 factor either to myself mentally or to someone in a team that I'm talking to, because most of the time when I'm helping people, I'm helping them get over these big hurdles of getting started, right? Getting started with not just Docker, but also Kubernetes, and also the idea of like an automated, a mostly automated pipeline in their software supply chain. And now, like the podcast that we'll talk about a little bit, but recently you talked on your podcast about secure supply chain, SBOMs, knowing where everything came from, and that's a we need to have a whole show on that soon. So maybe we'll have to do a panel. I'll have to bring you back or ask you who to invite or something. I'll have to ask you later on that. But
we're all over. Hey, that's what we're supposed to do. Rabbit holes, right?
Right.
But yes, SBOM and just the supply chain for security stuff, that's so important. And it's a very important topic. I'm happy. I know I'm going to get in trouble if I go off on that tangent. I need to stay focused on ephemeral environments.
We can all pretend that we know a little something about security, but
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, okay. To get myself back on track, because you keep getting me excited about stuff. Real quick. Oh, here's a question. There's a question.
Yeah, I was gonna. Sorry, I'm distracting you again, but it was related to someone saying is ephemeral inherently more secure. I have opinions, but I'm curious about what you think on that.
Yeah, I think that if you design your application from the ground up as being ephemeral, there's definitely some security benefits to it. Like you said, using 12 factor. So one of the best practices there, of course, is to not bake any keys or any secrets into your images. If they're ephemeral, it almost is kind of like a requirement that you don't do that.
Yeah.
sort of, but you'd be surprised what people get away try and do anyway. But no, I wouldn't say Ephemeral is intrinsically more secure. I think that if you use the really good patterns, you get security out of that, but it's not. I don't think it really has to do with security, to be frank. What do
Yeah.
you think, Brett?
I'm kind of agreeing. I feel like it's like the consulting answer is it depends, but I feel like my gut tells me that if your team is actually focusing on something like Ephemeral, basically what you're saying is at some point somewhere in your stuff, you're documenting and automating the creation, sort of the day zero or day one stuff, whether it's your dev environments, whether it's your servers or your staging or your CI platform, whatever. If you're doing that to the point that you can destroy it and recreate it, you're inherently going to know so much more about that system than someone who built it one time. And I think that the maturity of a team, you can almost, like if I look at a team and I see all their systems and their systems are all years old, and then things get created new and then they stay forever. And I see that pattern so often, right? And when I see that, they typically don't understand their environments. They don't know how to recreate them. They don't know what could be insecure on them. It's almost like these things go together. And that's not a technical point. It's almost like a team culture maturity problem. So if I walk into a room and they're working on ephemeral environments, like they're saying, yeah, we destroy all our CI on day, as soon as we create it, we do all the jobs and then we basically tear down all the agents and all the things. And we don't have this long running CI worker or whatever. I tend to find that they're way more on top of the ball on all the other aspects, like security updates, because when they're able to deploy things over and over again, they're also able to patch things over and over again, or apt-get update over and over again. And these things are just automated and it's in their brain. So it's almost like the answer is no, but yes, more secure probably.
Yeah. So no, technically, culturally, absolutely.
That's a great, much better, shorter answer than mine.
But to be fair, I gave a rambling answer first. So
okay.
But yeah, like it took us both a while.
3 tries. We got 3 tries.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I mean, look, let's talk about the highlights a little bit of ephemeral environments and what you get out of it. Look, it's really about that's great. Look, it's about collaboration. And so what do we mean by collaboration? So I mean, of course, please come to the website, contribute, whatever. But basically, this is kind of for the ephemeral environments that Shipyard does is as a subset of all ephemeral environments. But in general, it increases collaboration, right? So if I'm doing a pull request and I want Bret to do a code review on that, and you're in the middle of working on a different feature on the same repository, you get into a situation where, okay, well, now I have to interrupt my workflow. I have to potentially blow away my environment locally to test this thing.
Right.
And so this kind of enables you from a developer collaboration perspective to just go click around in a remote area. It gets a lot more powerful. It gets even more powerful when you start being able to bring product people into the feedback loop cycle earlier on. So product people in most companies typically don't really get to touch a feature that's being worked on until it's maybe on staging, sometimes on production.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're like, no, that's not the right color blue. Or, okay.
Yeah,
I'll be nice to product people but this is a DevOps environment, so I want to be mean, but I won't. But a product person being able to give feedback earlier on something that might have been an oversight on their behalf or on the developer's behalf means that, as a developer, I can just fix this right now while it's still an open PR, and I don't have to go through the testing, the QA, all this other stuff. And it just makes the whole organization move faster. Same type of thing, QA getting exposure to these feature environments earlier on. So that's kind of the collaboration piece. In regards to testing, that's another component of this, just running your CI/CD stuff off of these environments, off of ephemeral environments. Kind of is super valuable. And the other big stuff I would say is really the cost control on demand component, where a big issue in our ecosystem is waste, right? Kubernetes is amazing, but no one ever turns anything down. It's kind of the promise. It happens sometimes.
Yeah.
but being able to have a setup where, oh, hey, I only want this to live for 4 hours, or an on-demand startup. And if you're leveraging containers for your ephemeral environments, and I saw a question in there, you can set up ephemeral environments for VMs. It would probably take a lot longer to turn on and off. I personally am, I'm 100% in on, I'm 110% in on containers, so it's
Right.
hard for me to do anything else there. But then also being able to to turn these things on quickly. But you really just you have dev environments, you have these types of things that are running 128 hours a week, and they only really need to be running like 40 to 60. And so
Right.
there's cost savings, there's environmental stuff there depending on your scale. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like 1,000 little, like without anything ephemeral in your infrastructure, I feel like it's almost like death by 1,000 paper cuts at some point. Because, for example, a client of mine, if you spin up a server in AWS, the rule is I don't know if it's 7 days or 20 days or 30 days, but basically, if the server is there long enough, regardless of the purpose of it, you then suddenly get into a category of you have to have a patching process in place, you have to have it audited and security scanned. But if the thing lasts for a day, it doesn't fall into their security categories of higher risk because it's hanging around. So that's not an inherent feature of more secure servers, but it's just one of the many things I think about when security teams already look at temporary servers as a lower risk posture, because there's less chance for things to go wrong after the fact because you're tearing it down, right? It's going away.
Yeah.
So I love that you've narrowed this down to 6 topics, because it's almost like this is just like we could spend an hour just covering the 6 of these. I'm curious though, when I think about ephemeral, I'm an infrastructure guy, right? Like I live in ops. I just happen to pretend to be a dev. I'm over here in ops, and when I think about ephemeral environments that I've dealt with, I think of 3 main categories, and I don't know if I'm missing something, or maybe you can help me see if I'm on base at all. But I think of dev environments specifically for developers to dev. So like they're doing their work on it. Maybe there's a little gray area there of they're running something for themselves on it. It's not a part of CI or anything automated. It's just they're doing work on it as a part of their day-to-day job. They might be sharing it with another coworker or something temporarily. But anyway, dev-focused workflows. Then there's what most of us, I think, I'm going to guess, our tiptoe into anything ephemeral is dynamic agents and workers for CI. So automating, spinning up machines so that you could do a big CI run or something like that. Maybe temporary environments as a part of CI for epics or PRs or something. And then I think of actual full-fledged environments. Maybe it's a sales environment that runs the whole production infrastructure for a big sale, a client that needs a permanent environment. So it's sales 001, client 502. That's the kind of like the name of the environment. Or you have staging 5 because there's a reason for yet another staging environment. So I kind of almost think of these things as 3 different buckets. Am I way off there? Am I missing something?
No,
Yeah.
I think you're right. I mean, I would say that in 5 years, I think production will be ephemeral as well to some degree, in the sense that we want to make these things as portable as possible, right? So as Edge and WASM and all these other things become kind of ubiquitous in our community, having that staging server or the sales environment closer to JP Morgan or whatever in New York, on the edge in an environment, in a data center, and that itself being ephemeral. It's the pattern that I think we're seeing emerge. And so, so Shipyard today, because I have to talk about Shipyard too. Shipyard today is very focused on kind of those middle environments, kind of right of development and left of production, or kind of even left of staging, but people use them as staging environments as well. But I think that ephemeral environments are kind of, or ephemerality, is that a word?
It is today.
Okay. Ephemerality is kind of the future. And that's kind of where we're planting our flag on this whole topic.
Yeah.
But I think you're absolutely right, and the way you're thinking about it is right on the money.
Yeah,
And
I mean, I feel like there's a relationship here. Sorry to interrupt. That
no, no,
a lot of people ask about serverless on this channel. So, a standard question is when we're showing something that is infrastructure related with containers, someone will inevitably ask, "Does serverless make this obsolete or replace this?" And my answer is usually related to those things, saying, "Well, serverless usually is something running on containers, so things might be ephemeral, but usually the workflow doesn't necessarily change, right?" And in those cases where people are asking about that on here. But I almost look at like that's one of the outcomes of this is if you're ready to be ephemeral, if you're capable of doing things ephemerally, because we're going to have it as an adjective, a verb, and a noun all at the same time, and that workflow just leads you to start thinking about, well, I don't want any infrastructure, I don't want any service, and then you start seeing people tiptoe into serverless because they're things that you manually have to create and manage is work. And I don't know any DevOps professional that has free time. Like, it doesn't exist. So we all need to have more tools and less things to manage. Like we need more tools that automate more things so that we have less to manage. Sorry, I was making the wrong statement there. But how does this lead to so we're kind of defining the problem here, and I bet you that everyone's basically at this point like, okay, so how do we solve this problem? Like, how do we do these things? Dev Nell Zen, we will get back to your question about security challenges. We'll come back to security later. Definitely wanted to get us into talking a little bit more about Shipyard because that is one of the ways to solve this problem. Give us the elevator pitch.
Yeah, I mean, it's full stack environments on every pull request. That's really what Shipyard does. So it's a it's an environment per feature branch, and that's kind of what we do. I'm happy to jump into a quick demo that might kind of illustrate that better than,
let's do it.
than my words. So I can share my screen, hopefully successfully. Yep. Okay. Go. Looking good.
Devnell Zen asked, is Ephemeral platform independent? I'm not. I think the answer might be yes. I'm not really sure what that question implies, but
I think
possibly.
The idea is that Ephemeral, like everything you build, well, maybe not everything, but most things you build should be ephemeral, and there should be an ability to make copies of your entire stack so that it can be tested and used. So I would say, yeah, it's absolutely platform independent. I think that things like Kubernetes and containerization make it a lot easier and a lot faster. But I definitely would say that it's independent if that's what the question.
Yeah,
is asking.
And I think what you're also probably thinking there is that the newer the technology, the more cloud native the technologies you're using, and the people that make software have opinions, and so then that software has opinions. So if you're using something that was created 15, 20 years ago, I find that it's very hard to do anything ephemeral with those that tool, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier like SaltStack, like there's a lot of these tools that were created in the 2000s that don't take ephemeral as like a first-class citizen as a feature, where containers were sort of built from the ground up with that in mind, right? Like these things can be destroyed, go away, come back again, and that I think has that's caught fire, and now we have all these wonderful tools that have that as a first-class feature. So for you, Devnell Zen, just make sure if you're looking into doing this, that your tooling expects things to be ephemeral, because trying to take an old tool and make things temporary is actually it kind of sucks. It's kind of hard. So I'm excited to learn about Shipyard because we need more tools that assume things will not last out of the gate. So it's kind of fun.
Absolutely.
Oh,
all right, cool.
Sorry, we're looking at yours, not my screen. Your screen.
Well, are we? Everyone you can see everything. It's good.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, so
that's right. You can't tell.
I don't have two screens, so I'm just looking at. I'm just guessing. But yeah, no. So we can just jump in real quick, and this is like a pretty technical demo that your audience is probably it's tuned to your audience, hopefully. So just gonna OAuth in here with GitHub, and that's the first thing. And then this is my my personal organization, and what we're going to run through is basically adding a sample application, and then kind of watching it go. So I'm just gonna, oops. So I'm gonna add this Node backend React front end application, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a quick PR, and it's kind of gonna show you what's going on. I'm gonna talk about how we do this in a second. I'm just gonna go ahead and deploy this, create the PR, and then we'll go back and I'll show you how all this stuff works underneath the hood. So I'm gonna just quickly go over here, and I'm gonna change something. Let's see, what should we change? I'm gonna change the background of the top. So we'll do demo for Bret. Oh, sorry, one T, right? Fisher.
There you
go. Live stream. Yeah, see, I really am a developer. I can't stop myself from trying to do good commits at this point. It's it's like a it's a habit. It's kind of fun.
And you can't possibly make a generic branch. That would just be.
I can't do it. I mean, I can, but I've gotten frustrated
unable
with so many people for doing it. So it's like I can't.
Try it. PR, try again. PR, try three.
Yeah. Especially with your audience, I'm gonna try and do a little bit more.
That's true. As we do one thing, we do all things. So let's do these example PRs correctly.
Exactly. All right. So you'll see over here that Shipyard has picked up the PR, and it's going to start building in the background. I'm going to go back over here for a second and kind of introduce you to a few quick concepts. The first thing, and I think Taylor, or I'm not sure who said this, but someone brought up security. So look, security around your ephemeral environments is very important. So that's one of the things that we take pretty seriously. So in this particular instance, we add, oops, no, it doesn't matter. We add SSO in front of your in front of all these environments, because these environments are not meant for prime time, right? They're meant to share internally. So you don't want these shareable links to go to everybody. So SSO controls, that's super important. Securely storing environment variables at rest. That kind of goes back to the 12-factor stuff we were talking about early on. And there's a few other things there, but I kind of want to show you how we do this first. Okay, I mentioned to you that Peter and myself were kind of Kubernetes consultants, and we went around and we talked to a whole lot of people. And what we found was that if you're starting to try and use Helm charts or raw Kubernetes manifests without too much experience, it can be really challenging. So what we saw working on the ground was people using Docker Compose. So we kind of went a little crazy, and we said, you know what? We don't need to do another YAML. What if we just use Docker Compose, transpile that to best practice Kubernetes, and then kind of, go from there. So that's what we did. So one of the things that we did do is we actually extend Docker Compose, but by extend, I mean we used metadata labels. In this particular case, there's two services here, back end and front end, and so you need to tell us where you're going to route. So we do that.
Can you zoom in on that, by the way?
Sure. How's that?
There you go. A little better.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. And so we're going to go back over here, and we're going to go look at our environment. So we're going to go take a look at it from the GitHub, and we'll see. Oh, oops, I forgot to show you the first one. Let me go over here, and we'll do a little side by side. And you'll kind of see, okay, here's the original, and then we made the banner gold on the right. So you can start to see like, oh, this is the change that's happening. Pretty simple demo, but I think it shows you the power of this stuff. And then obviously, as you iterate on this, if we want to make another change, in fact, what color do you want it to be, Bret?
Blue.
Blue. Okay. We're gonna do that.
Baby blue, just like that. Baby
well,
blue.
I don't know what's the CSS for baby blue. Is that
okay? Now you gotta make me look it up.
Okay, tell me a hex value or a wait, I'm on the wrong branch. we're gonna change it from
Mm.
gold.
Ooh,
Can we do blue, or do you need baby blue?
no, blue is fine.
All right,
There's
we're gonna
there.
do the.
Why is there one that's called NYPD blue?
Okay, is that I'm a little nervous to try a new. Is it NYPD? Let's see if it happens.
No,
But hey, you know what? This is part of the process. Like
no, 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 no,
this
no, no.
work.
I'm sorry. I was going to give you the hex code. I don't know what all these.
All
I was
right,
just found a random
give me
website.
give me the hex. Give me the hex.
39 Bravo 7 Charlie Delta.
Great. I'm glad that I was a little worried that.
Oh, now we have people donating color hex in the.
Sure. All right, we're gonna go with Brett's for now, but we can do another one in a second. Update color hex to NYPD blue. Of course, I really can't stop myself from doing good commits. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to commit that, and then we'll go back over to Shipyard, and we'll see that it's been picked up, and now it's building up. It's building this thing, so it'll be ready probably in it's fully rebuilding everything and doing all that stuff. And actually, in this particular example, I believe, it's SCSS, so it's like running the whole compilation step and all that stuff for the CSS.
Okay.
So that'll be ready in a second. And we'll go look at that in a second. But it's actually going to take us. Well, we'll let Shipyard tell us when it's ready. But yeah, I mean, actually, we can you can kind of see the build history here, show you a little bit more cool stuff.
So let me just make sure I understand. You've got this. You got a repo, and you got a Shipyard compose file.
So it's just a Docker compose file,
yep.
But we read it and we say, hey, which Docker compose file to use. We do add some specific labels, and actually,
sure.
If you want to go check out our docs, we have a nice list of. Oh wait, no, that's not where it is. Where did we put that? Oh yes, it is right here. So we have a nice list. So these are all the different things that we support. So for those metadata labels. So
right.
I mentioned data migrations. We have one for Shipyard init where you might want to run your Alembic migrations or whatever. We've got liveliness probes and stuff like that. So we do extend some of the Kubernetes stuff down to pro users through this label system. But the whole idea here is it's kind of like there's an uncanny ability for humans to figure out patterns. Like, for example, your 95-year-old grandmother that knows exactly how to hold the rabbit ears on a TV to get rid of the static on channel 4. I don't know how, but we're all good at that.
Right.
That's kind of like what Docker Compose is, like make it work locally. And then Shipyard kind of takes care of the rest. One other quick thing to show you here, because this is a commonly asked question. How do you get to these environments and how do you iterate on these environments? So we actually are leveraging a really cool tool that you guys should check out. We've done some pretty hardcore customization to it, but it's called Kubebox. And so we actually have a terminal. And while we're doing that, I think that this environment is loaded. It is. So, and we can see that's NYPD blue.
I guess so. That's what it looked like on the screen. Yeah.
Oh, that's weird. I mean, I live in New York. I mean, I would think it was a darker blue, but okay.
Yeah. You should know your color. What's wrong with you? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like a teal. Anyway, but we'll go back over to the terminal. And remember, I told you we take that compose, we transpile it to best practices Kubernetes YAMLs. So we're actually looking at the pods and the namespaces themselves.
Okay.
And so then you can see all the stuff that's going on. You can actually exec in to see the running thing, and you can do whatever you want to do. And that's one of the ways that we actually secure these environments is we kind of force you to go through this terminal. We're working on figuring out a really secure way to access these environments, but again, security is a first-class citizen in our world. So we're very anal retentive about that stuff.
So it's building these containers, right? It's building the images rather.
Yeah.
And it's storing those, I guess, a registry that you have that's a Shipyard registry. Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that our security model works is that every one of our organizations, so your GitHub organization, you get a single tenant cluster for yourself. And so inside that cluster, that is very hard for us to access and is not commingling with anyone else's data, your source code is there. There's a internal registry that we use. We also obviously connect to your external registries if you want us to pull some images,
Sure.
some images.
So the compose file has like another image.
Yeah.
You have to pull that, but it knows how to build. I guess, sorry to interrupt. I was just realizing that, this thing is actually building an image and then it's storing it somewhere and then it has to run it somewhere on a cluster. And all of that's getting taken care of by Shipyard. So someone doesn't have to have an existing CI workflow of where do I build my images? Where do I store them? How do I get to them from Shipyard? Like it sounds like it's a part of the solution.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I think we really work in conjunction with CI/CD systems. Like a lot of our customers kind of use Shipyard environments to test against in their own CI pipeline. Now, all the building and the deploying and all that stuff and generating the secure certs and the orchestration and the tear down and the push up, tear up, pull up. I don't know what the right word for that is. That all happens on our end. But then and we have like an API, so a common pattern, and we actually have a circle orb that some people are using. It's pretty cool. And the basic pattern is wait for Shipyard to tell me that the environment is alive and ready to go. Then run my suite of Cypress tests or Mook tests or whatever against that environment, using, and that includes the security layer. And there's actually a bypass token that we allow you to use for CI/CD stuff.
Nice. And because traditionally, when I've been working with teams on this sort of CI ephemeral environment automation, there's a lot of bespoke code there. Like usually we got a bunch of shell scripts, we got try-fors waiting for things to spin up. You just a whole lot of back and forth there that it sounds like you're removing the burden of having to rebuild all that stuff.
Yeah, and that is exactly right.
All right. I got a dozen other questions, but I know you got things you want to show, so I'm
no. I mean,
please go.
Look, no. I feel like that you guys get the idea. There's all kinds of other stuff in here. I'm happy to do more of that later, but I'm going to stop and I'd love to answer questions because you guys get the feel. For all the stuff that's happening. So
Paul's asking, are these on your own cloud or are these on a specific cloud? I guess is what Paul's asking.
Yeah. So today we run all of our organization clusters between GKE and EK. Sorry, not EKS. Yeah, no, EKS. Yes, EKS. So on AWS and GCP. I always mess up EKS versus AKS because
funny how our brains work. Yeah.
Well, it's just AWS. Anyway, so we run those on those. Not the biggest secret in the world. We're probably going to be releasing some ability for you to run it on your own infrastructure pretty soon.
Okay.
But one of the big things about this is not having to worry about it. So kind of bootstrapping clusters and then worrying about that, like you're still kind of dealing with that sometimes. So we've been reluctant to give up that level of control so far.
Well, and true, like a lot of people that are looking, there's the group that has figured this all out already, and they build ephemeral environments and they tear them down, and it's in their own infrastructure, and they're using a half a dozen tools to do it. And then there are those that are staring at this problem, knowing that they need to solve it. And it sounds like it was a great point. Actually, Sabine had a question around this. This isn't replacing a CI tool. It sounds like this is adding on to a CI tool to give your CI sort of superpowers for testing or human testing or automated testing purposes as a part of the CI.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Because all year long, I've been talking about GitHub Actions on this channel. Like I've had multiple projects all year long. I've moved with my personal repos and all my training. I've moved everything out of like I used to build with just building a generic Docker file in Docker Hub, but I've moved a lot of that to GitHub Actions because of all the awesomeness of GitHub Actions. Yeah. And so I've been really bullish on that. And we've had multiple shows on this year about how to do super linting and how to build with Docker BuildX and all the Docker build tools. And I feel like for me, the next one for me to open source is to give patterns on how to spin up a Kubernetes cluster, or how to spin up a bunch of containers without having to worry about Kubernetes, because maybe their Kubernetes is so far removed they don't have to care about manifest or something. And
Right.
so I'm interested in like, where are there open source parts of this that, is there a line there, or
Yeah.
what exists? Yeah.
So first off, we use a whole bunch of open source tools. So shout out. I mean, the list.
Right.
I think the list of all of our infrastructures on open source tools is ridiculous. I'm just going to start with. I'll just say Linus. Thanks.
Okay.
We'll just start
Right.
there. And then everything else below that, like, thank you as well.
Right.
Right now, the open source side of Shipyard is it's an internal thing, but we have a lot of really cool plans.
Okay.
On open sourcing a bunch of stuff, but that's coming. We do actually have a developer kind of preview that we're giving people access to, and because we're fans of the show and obviously we're here, we set up a URL so that you can kind of sign up, and I won't say the front of the line, but yeah, you'll be in the front of the line. So it's teeny URL. Brett, I think you have it. It's teeny URL. Yeah.
Yeah, I just put it in chat.
Great. It's tinyurl.com/Bret Fisher SY. Does anyone know if teeny URLs are case sensitive? I feel like they would.
That is a great question. I don't know.
They wouldn't be, right? Like, I don't think you.
I hate it when they are, like Bitly's.
Yeah.
I feel like it breaks the internet, but I get it for tiny URLs, like, or whatever, like your URL shorteners. I get it why they need them to be so much shorter. So,
all right. Well,
anyway,
capital B.
But yes. Yeah. Capital B.
Capital F. Capital S. Capital Y. So tinyurl.com/Bret Fisher SY. 1T. I'll let everyone know that. It's weird that I'm telling you how to spell your name, because I'm obviously trying to talk to your audience, but just in reality, I'm actually just telling you how to spell your own name.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And then, but yeah, so that's super interesting. And one other thing in general, I think that that open source is super duper important. And so I also am actually fortunate enough to be a co-host of Kubernetes podcast, which I'll plug for 1 second. It's Kubelist. We get to interview open source projects all the time. So I'm constantly talking to people and feeling somewhat inadequate on Shipyard's open source front, but soon these things.
Is it hosted on HeavyBit's site?
Yeah, you got. I think kubelist.com is also a URL where we have. It's also a newsletter that we do mostly weekly. But yeah, you found the right one on HeavyBit.
Oh, because I searched podcast, it sent me there first. All right.
Yeah, there's a podcast as well. But you guys should spend all your energy going to shipyard.build more than probably kubelist.com. But I care about both, so I'm torn. But I have a marketing person that might get mad at me for doing that.
And I love that we have all these Kubernetes related and CNCF related podcasts now, because I feel like I have more podcast content directly related to my job than I could finish in a week, like coming out every week, and I can't get through it all. Which is great, because I feel like just 3 years ago or whenever I started mine, there wasn't much. Like, there was, I don't think, any official one from Google or anyone else. But yeah, it's great to see all this content out there, and it's a good one. You co-host that with Mark?
Yeah, Mark from Replicated.
Mm-hmm. Because I figured with you guys having that background, and we haven't had Mark on the show, but I got to meet him this year, specifically because I'm on a project to implement Replicated. So I'm hoping to have them on the show. I've mentioned them a couple times on this show. For those of you, sidebar, for those of you that are watching that don't know about our Patreon, like the little $5 a month High Fivers Club. Part of the benefits of that is you get to join us every month. We do sort of like a Google Hangout, we technically do it in Discord, but it's basically like a coffee hangout for an hour. We just talk about DevOps stuff, the jobs we're doing. It's just a bunch of people hanging out at the water cooler, basically. But as a part of that, this last week, we were, oh no, I've lost my brain. My train of thought.
I'm guessing KubeCon.
Yeah, well, we were talking about KubeCon as well, but I keep bringing up Replicated because a lot of these companies make software, and Replicated has such great open source tooling for shipping your own software as a Kubernetes friendly thing, and we'll get him on the show so he can actually explain it better than me. But that's an open core company. Like that, to me, that company, they have tons of open source. So I figured that you coming with that background and that's in your blood, that you're probably got some plans for releasing a couple of tools or a tool or something with Shipyard that's open source,
or
the whole thing.
Yeah. Yes, you're no commitments, but yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Very much in our DNA as a company. And you said something earlier that it brings up the ephemeral environments, all the stuff we're talking about. We've been very fortunate to get some super engineers on the team, and they come from some various companies. But one in particular, I won't name names, we were able to recruit very, very quickly. And he was a pretty high-level DevOps person at a pretty big company. And a few people were like, how in the world did you get this guy to leave this awesome company and come work on Shipyard? Especially because it was very quick. It was like a 12-hour thing. And the simple answer is what we're building is kind of all of our dreams. You know what I mean? Like, or my dream, I won't speak for you, Bret, but like just the whole idea of like automatically turning on stuff, automatically turning off stuff. Oh, it's hurt. Oh, it's going to self-heal. And like really putting it all together and then exposing that to your entire org to like have massive velocity increases and efficiency gains. I mean, I've tried to build versions of that time, and I think we all have.
Right.
And so, yeah, you were just talking about like the buy versus build. And I think like I love GitHub Actions as well. But the intrinsic problem with all of this stuff is that like setting it up like demo wise, like it's always amazing and it's always great. It's a great feeling. I've done it so many times.
Right.
But then you get into like the little things like, oh, the Let's Encrypt certificate and just all these little things you were talking about a second ago. And then the maintenance side of it. And so really, I think, and we think as a company that you're going to start seeing a lot more SaaS products and, buy versus build for these non-specific issues. Like I think DevOps people should be focusing on making the local development environment or remote development environment experience for that matter. Like you kind of talked about that. Really good, really fast. And then also, hey, my real job is SRE, SLIs, all that other stuff, and focusing on production. And ephemeral environments kind of fit into all of that. And like I said, in the future, it's all going to be, in my mind, it's all going to be ephemeral environments. Yeah. But that's kind of how we look at the ecosystem and where the world is right now.
Yeah. I have similar views where as a DevOps person, I feel like two of my main customers are the dev teams and their environments, right? How long do their tests take to run in CI? How can I improve that? How can I make their local dev setup a dreamy, wonderful landscape of, easy tools that always work on every platform, blah, 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 right? And then there's the ops that is my true love that maybe is more where a traditional SRE would live, a little bit more on the ops side. And I obviously, servers, environments, uptime, blah, blah, blah. And so I often find that when you help the dev team, it's kind of a trickle down effect to ops in a lot of ways. If you're coming at dev with an ops mindset and you're like, hey, let me give you these ephemeral tools or this one file that you can shortly describe in a very similar format, all the things that make your app work so that it'll automatically set up in CI, like that just to me benefits everyone downrange, ops, any DevOps people, any SRE people, customers, all that stuff. So I get excited at any point when a developer acknowledge, or thanks me or uses anything that I created for them.
Right.
Because when you're a developer in a team that doesn't spend a lot of time helping itself, right? Because if you're traditionally sort of a pre-DevOps mindset organization, these companies, they're all product driven. They're product feature driven. Everything's about a product feature or a bug. It's all customer. And there's a ton of this tech debt that builds up. And to me, these ephemeral environment setups are often a part of that tech debt where the teams have a goal of CI building a Kubernetes cluster, or just spinning up our containers and doing basic, health check testing between them. These are all goals they have in their processes, but they rarely ever fully get there. They might have like one little thing ephemeral, but then there's all these other things that are ephemeral. They might set up Jenkins workers, but the workers themselves aren't ephemeral. So then there's stale things that happen over time, and they have different old Docker versions in the new ones, and things go awry. And like you're saying, finally getting to where everything possible that you can make ephemeral is ephemeral. I think it benefits everybody, every part of the stack, every part of the ecosystem that you're dealing with, whether it's the customers that get to play with a beta environment that you set up that just happens to go away at the end of the beta automatically. I love that. And so I this all doesn't sound like it's exactly like literally that was easy push button, but the fact that you're already choosing Compose, which anyone who's listened to me on this channel knows I'm a huge advocate of Compose. So anything you do in Compose, I will applaud you. Like we'll give you.
Yeah, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. Because I don't want to go hang out with my Red Hat friends that'll just make fun of me. Yeah.
Right. We don't need yet another format. And I
was actually. Did you see the saying on the website? Did you see it? We have a thing.
Maybe.
I have a saying.
Maybe.
I say nay, not another YAML.
Oh.
Yeah, I came up with that myself.
Are you the Knights of Nay?
Can I use that? Is that trademark? Can I use Knights of Nay?
No.
Okay. Oh, it is trademark. Okay, thank you.
Knights of Knee, the Knights of Knee is, but not Nay.
Okay, but not Nay.
Anyway, sorry, what were we saying? Oh, I have a question for you, but you were on a topic, so
no. I was just agreeing that. I mean, look, I think this is a sidebar, but I do think that every company coming up with their own YAML format just contributes to the tech debt thing, because there's just like this. It's just like we got to standardize. I think we're going there. Right now, Compose to me is the most accessible application definition. We tried this stuff with raw manifest, but it's just you run into all kinds of problems there. But what was your question?
Well, it was a little bit digging into the Compose thing. So being someone who's probably had half a dozen videos in the last year about Compose V2 and the new Golang revival of sorts of Compose as a plugin to Docker rather than a standalone Python tool. Docker announced a couple years ago that they're moving to the Compose spec, which is great for, I'm sure, you and everyone else, because depending on Compose, when it's not a formal spec that multiple organizations are agreeing upon, gets a little dicey. And although it's been around for 8 years, so we could argue that it's sort of an institution already. Do you deal with that at all? Are you versioned on the Compose spec? Is that how I write the file? I noticed in one of your files I had version 3 in it, and I was curious if you guys were adopting the new Compose spec. Really,
we support all. We go 2 and above. We support for Compose. So yeah, we actually use the project, the Compose project, for our parsing of Compose itself.
Okay.
But I think we're using the old. Can't remember if we're using the new one or the old. We have definitely planned to use the new Compose Docker Space Compose versus Docker Dash Compose.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, because that new. I'm just thinking out loud here, but that new Compose spec, I think it's just composespec.org or something like that.
I think that's right.
I've shown people before on the channel, so if they've been around a while, that's not new to them. But there's this actual spec document. I was wondering if there's a future where, because metadata has its limits, right? It's not always
we've gone insane with it, so you'd be surprised what you can pull off with that. But yeah, no, my CTO, Peter, is actually part of the Compose working, or he attends the meetings at the very least.
Oh, good.
And so we're keeping an eye on that for sure, and look forward to that. Truthfully speaking, we have like early version. Well, we're getting there. We'll probably do Helm support and raw Kubernetes manifest support as we go. Depending on the organization, there's some people that have a lot of in-house talent around this stuff. And so, I still believe in Compose, but probably Helm support is very, very close around the corner, and some other stuff as well. But we really get to kind of control how it works. I didn't dive into this, but there's parts of Compose that we use.
Right.
And we infer from, like depends on, for example, like we actually support depends on, by bootstrapping in a init container in Kubernetes land and doing all kinds of some might say hackery, some might say very smart, opinionated decisions.
Well, I do love opinionated defaults, right? Like I think that Docker and the Docker tooling in particular really kind of nailed, at least for me, the approach of let's have sane defaults and then you can override. I think they call it what, batteries included but swappable or something like that.
Yeah, there's some of
And
the security decisions though.
only time will tell. Well, and yeah, it's secure by default. They killed it in some ways. Like Swarm is secure by default. Like I love the encrypted traffic and all that. Versus if you remember Kubernetes before kubadmin, like things wouldn't always be encrypted or mutual TLS. But
that's fair. That's right.
But also, yeah, right. Like why does my code run by default in a container as root? Like there's a lot of these little things that I think that they made the right call on getting new people easy onboarding, but not giving any sort of warnings out of the box. And there's an interesting rabbit hole where the whole captain's group, we give a lot of internal feedback to the team, and quite often we're trying to nowadays get them to highlight like some of the danger zones and the edges through the command line, so that people can do the things that have been written on the internet for 8 years and not ruin their security by doing that, and by just giving them simple little warnings in the command line that says, hey, by the way, this container's maybe you don't need to run as root, or whatever the other potential problems are in there. But
I think that the user stuff is what totally agree with that.
So I'm sorry, you were saying adding Helm support, so that basically whatever the file is in there. But to be clear, sorry, let me ask the other question. If I have a compose file in my repo, I still need to create another one for.
We just
use that one. Okay, so I just add labels to it, and they're sort of harmless labels, and okay, I like it.
And we do have an interface for that, so you kind of keep the infrastructure as code thing going on. And in the future, there might be some cool Shipyard local client to give you some of our cool data snapshotting and data migration tools and stuff like that. So our whole thing is if it works locally, it works on Shipyard. That's kind of what we're going for, ease of use there.
Yeah. Martin has a question. There is also the open application model. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's really cool. I think that's a sandbox project, I believe, for CNCF, or maybe the people that do it is a sandbox project, I want to say.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I believe. Oh yeah, Kubevela is like a sandbox project. I haven't looked at it as much as I probably should have, but it's definitely on our radar. Look, I'm good with whatever the community decides is the application definition, but it's a problem. I think that there's just too many ways to do this stuff. And so, and obviously Shipyard as a partner in the ecosystem, we really want to help lead that. But right now it seems like there's a lot of options, and again, right now Compose to us is the one that makes the most sense.
Same to me. I'm glad you did it. I really am. I think that Compose. I think that a lot of companies not doubling down on Compose and choosing to do their own thing might eventually backfire or not be the best idea.
Well, the other thing that I don't think, unless you're a DevOps person, that you've dealt with very much, is as smart and cool as it is to run Minikube or K3D or Kind or whatever on your local developer's machine. Oftentimes you then become like an SRE for every developer in your company, because there's just issues when you're running a cluster locally. Minikube has gotten so much better. And I know Docker has Docker for Kubernetes and all that stuff. But personally, as a DevOps person, I think that for ease of onboarding and kind of ease of support, that you should look. There's sometimes that's not an option, but for the most companies out there, you can just use Docker Compose. Like, look, I know that Airbnb has 150 microservices. Compose might not work perfectly for that. Actually, I'm pretty sure they use Compose, but then they have like a tool system
Well,
where they
you rarely probably need to run all
it.
150 on your single dev machine anyway. But yeah, no, I mean I'm
Right.
totally with you. Compose in my trainings and in my consulting, Compose is always my go-to. I actually onboarded or worked with a company this week that was tipping their toe into containers, and before we even started talking about Kubernetes or any orchestration or cloud native distributed computing model, I made them walk through the exercise of creating a compose file, because to me it's the shortest description in YAML or any sort of infrastructure as code file format, the shortest description of how your app works. Like, I don't think there's any, no one does a single manifest anymore. So now you're either going to be forced to look at a bunch of different Docker files and try to infer what that all means, or a whole bunch of manifest files that have a bunch of other concerns, like where your secrets are stored and how many PVCs you need. And like that's some of it. But man, you can get Compose. Usually you can describe a really complex app in less than 150 lines and have all the bells and whistles in it. And I just love that. I love that you can look at that and it basically tells you how does all the parts of this app communicate, which parts of this app need to be started first. If you write it the way I write it, you can probably tell where are the ingress points, because you only are publishing ports that you need. Or there's just so much wonderful stuff in it, and I'm looking forward. If those of you haven't looked, go read that Compose spec or go kind of dig around. You'll see that there's other stuff coming. We've talked about on here, like Docker Compose will add. The new Docker Compose that just came out this year allows you to do things like profiles, which is fantastic. A whole new way to basically segment out the different parts of your services, so you can spin up a bunch at a time, but not all of them at the same time. So I think having Shipyard as an extension of that just makes total sense. I am not a fan of running an entire Kubernetes cluster locally just so that you can spin up a Node.js app to develop it, right? Like it doesn't. I don't know any developer that wants to do that.
And then you have Webpack running anyway, which isn't the way it's set up normally. So you have to have a special setup for that. And then it takes 5 minutes to turn on that container. Sorry, I digress. But yes. Also, little Compose pro tip that I'm sure you know, but just for your audience. My favorite Compose thing, I think one of them is using the network overlay stuff, where you can have like two separate Compose files that can talk to each other by just using the same network. And so we use that a whole bunch. I didn't get into like our multi-repo stuff. We have a whole native support for multiple repos. So if you have a front-end app repository and a back-end repository, all kinds of stuff there. But that's also a pattern that we see, and not doing it in Kubernetes land, it makes your life easier locally. Obviously, everything's built on Kubernetes, big CNCF supporter. It's just we prioritize accessibility for the developer and for the people over that. But but we're going to support Helm pretty soon anyway. So But I still love Compose.
Yeah, and they both have their uses. So I don't think we're going to be getting down to one file to describe all environments for an application anytime soon. But I would say that being able to describe nearly all your environments with Docker files, Compose files, and Helm or Customize or whatever your template of choice is, like just having those three to be able to describe all environments, all setups, all builds, that's still better than we've ever been. Like that's still the best thing we've come up with. So some people just want to complain and burn the whole thing down. But I think that we are definitely getting better, and those are the three sort of formats that I would still choose. So I know we're running long. I'm going to rapid fire some questions. Feel free to give short answers. I just want to make sure everybody got their questions answered, and there's some that I kind of skipped. Let's see. I feel like we answered the DevNel Zen questions from earlier. Taylor asked, how is ephemeral environments different from a VM or a container? These are ephemeral too.
Yeah, they're not. You can use ephemeral environments. You should have ephemeral environments that are VM based or container based. Container is just the benefit of being a little bit quicker. But obviously security downsides to that, by the way. VMs are the hypervisor is a very important security tool in my mind. Right.
I think maybe one of the distinctions here too is that when you say you're building something ephemerally, if that's another way to say it, that you assume that it will be torn down either automated or sometime soon by a human or a robot. Whereas that is not an assumption of creating a container or a VM. Like sure, containers go away, they can be removed, but man, when people are getting started, I see people creating containers all the time that they couldn't get rid of because they're writing something in the container they shouldn't be, or there's also a server that runs that container. So is the VM that's running the containers also disposable and they can be spun back up instantly on the fly when needed? Like that's to me the difference between creating things that can be destroyed and things that are truly ephemeral. That's just my
Could not agree more.
That was a longer answer than I should have given because it's not quick. All right. Anton asks, are ephemeral environments feature guides can be applied for on-premise reality of big enterprise companies? And I think what Anton's trying to say is, how does this work in an on-premise big enterprise company?
Sure. So we actually have some pretty large enterprise customers. So they have development shops, they've got product people, they've got QA people. So they still have the need for ephemeral environments so that all of them can collaborate. And honestly, that's where we're seeing the most success these days inside companies and organizations of that size. So yeah, absolutely, it's very valuable to them. And the more complex the organization, frankly, the more value you get out of ephemeral environments because there's more people, there's more stakeholders that need to have access to these per environments per feature.
Right. I definitely agree with that. Like a company that makes a piece of software that's what you would qualify as an enterprise, they like whenever I step foot into those places, they have so many bespoke ways to deploy that application for so many purposes. Like we mentioned earlier, QA might need their own thing just so they have a learning platform just for people that are onboarded to the company to learn the product. Like there's just, you name it, there's an environment for that. And those environments always tend to grow and not shrink. It's usually really hard to destroy something that you've created unless when you created it, there's the expectation of ephemerality.
Yeah. Ephemerality, that's our new word.
Ephemerality. So yeah.
Paul, I just saw Paul asked a great question on the data side for that.
Go.
Or are we going in order? Sorry.
No. Well, let's do Paul after this one. Sabine asked, interested in knowing how Shipyard adds value over just having a normal CI/CD stack deploying every branch to AWS Fargate or something. And my first comment on that is, well, who's going to do all the work of creating those for every branch or set up the automation to create a Fargate for every branch? So, either you could have something like, not for me to sit here and promote Shipyard, but either you're going to have to build this all yourself or get a product that does that for you. And that's, I think, what I feel like the Shipyard value is, right? Is that, sure, we could do it ourselves.
I'll send you your check after the show. But yes, that's exactly right. Sarcasm. Sarcasm, to be clear.
I am not receiving compensation for this interview. All right, let's get down to the Paul one. What about when you need persistent data, databases or user created content, etc.?
So that's a really good question, and that's something that Shipyard does very, very well. If you take a look at docs.shipyard.com, .build. By the way, shipyard.com. By the way, all of you I am tasking all of your audience with a mission. We really want to be super duper duper successful, so we can buy the brewery called Shipyard Brewery, because they own shipyard.com, and we're not going to get that URL until we can afford to buy
a brewery. Okay.
But the tentative roadmap is that we're gonna also have a beer company, so we can get that URL.
This makes complete sense.
But to actually answer the data question, basically that's the biggest problem that we ran into early on. And so what Shipyard does is we take instant snapshots. So if you have a named volume in Docker Compose, we see that, and I remember we mentioned that we infer things. So we're like, okay, that's a PVC. You want to add that to multiple services potentially, which can be challenging in a Kubernetes world. And also you want to persist that build to build, because if you have an environment that spins up just a bunch of empty containers with no data, it's not actually going to work, especially for your QA and product people. So it defeats the purpose. So we kind of follow that PR pattern where all named volumes get instantly snapshotted and then instantly bootstrapped for all the children environments that are created. And that's honestly a super challenging thing to do. So that's a really good reason not to build it yourself.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
but yeah, that is a great question, Paul, and that is a huge value add. That is one of the things that I think we've solved a lot of
Yeah.
problems. I mean, Brett, you mentioned like companies build this themselves. I there's been a lot of companies that have been like, oh no, we do this already, or we're gonna do it, and then a few months later they come back and like, oh hey, let's use Shipyard.
Yeah.
It's just the pain to build this
Well,
stuff out.
and just, I mean, what we're really talking about here is these things are happening all day, every day, right? Like anytime you're talking about ephemeral CI or, like you said, staging ish stuff, you're in unless you're a developer team of one, there are probably PRs every day. That means there are environments spinning up and spinning down every day. And that means if you're having to save some persistent data, maybe it's logs, whatever, you're now having to save that multiple times every day. And then at some point you have to clean that up because these things grow. It's like weeds. Data storage on this stuff is insane. I just finished a implementation of GitHub Action runners, the workers that do all the work for private data centers or whatever with GitHub Actions, and I happened to kill the 200 gigabyte drive in less than a week because we didn't make up a plan for cleaning off images. And every time it builds the image, it puts it on a server and tests it. And then if we're not automatically cleaning up after that by removing images, servers fill up. So I myself am guilty of trying to build some of this ephemerality and not doing the whole thing, right? We wanted to capture logs in GitHub Actions, I think artifacts or whatever they call it, or annotations. I can't remember what it's called. But that was a whole project just to get a couple of files, put them up on a place, and then make sure they go away in a reasonable time frame so that everyone can get access to them. And even when GitHub Actions has a feature for that, it was still, I don't know, a week or two of work to get everything to work right. And so having some tools like this,
change, and then it's going to break your whole pipeline,
right?
And then you're going to have to redo it. Again, I'll send you the check for plugging Shipyard after the show. And by the way, Brett, I don't know if you heard, but tinyurl.com/capital BRETT capital F 1T. Damn. All right. You can sign up for a developer access so that you can solve that problem for your customers is what I was trying to say, but then I messed up the URL.
The tiny URL still works lowercase. So it's tinyurl.com/Bret Fisher SY. Yeah.
Perfect.
Still works. I just tested it.
Awesome.
Well, I know I kind of felt like we cut your demo short, but
no, not at all.
Wanted to just totally thank you for being on the show. And I learned a bunch. So
awesome. Well, really appreciate it. Am I supposed to get my coffee now? Because I think you said that we're supposed to sit around with coffee or something. I guess we're already way past that point.
We can do lunch. Let's do lunch.
Let's do lunch.
What's your coffee cup? It's a
local
moose. Moose.
Yeah, coffee. This is a local coffee.
Oh, coffee. All right.
I don't know what that means. A coffee place in my neighborhood called Variety. It's great coffee for anyone in New York or Brooklyn.
There you go.
Variety Coffee. It's a great place.
Well, thank you.
But if you're gonna, I got my SpaceX.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Very nice. Very nice.
So I too have some space references.
Yeah.
Easily available.
Well, thank you, Benjie, so much for being on the show. I look forward to hearing about new releases and all the new features. Ephemeral environments and ephemeral containers and all that stuff for me is a big hot topic. So I'm sure we'll have more people on the show to talk about this in the future. You know where to find Shipyard. We was shipyard.build. Everyone, you see the little Twitter handle below us, so you can reach out to either one of us. I can't put my hand on your side of the screen, but just pretend. And we will be back here next week, live on Thursday. Let's see if I have. November. No, I don't know who's next week. I don't have. And there's someone next week. We're gonna have someone on the show next week. Don't know who it is. And sadly, it's not going to be Benjie.
It's not me. It's not me.
But thank you for showing up, everyone, for the live chat and to ask the great questions of our wonderful guest. And again, you can find all the links in the show notes. If you're watching this after the fact, they're all down below in the description. And then this will eventually make it to a podcast that you can also find at podcast.bretfisher.com. So you can listen to that on your favorite podcast app. Again, like and subscribe, blah, 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 all those things. Sign up for my Patreon. Yay. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week. Ciao, everyone.